for another stimulating afternoon. Up next is Liza Daly. Her title is called A Cautionary Tale About Poor Ebook Markup. I have no idea what this is going to be about. Liza is the VP of Engineering at Safari Books Online. She founded the ebook tech company 3Press, which created the IBIS reader, the first HTML e-reader. And that is her short and sweet introduction. Welcome, Liza.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. When I was first approached to come talk at this event, my instinct was to say no, because I thought, I don't make ebooks anymore, and I figured that most of you have surpassed my knowledge in the craft of making ebooks. But then I did some more thinking about it, because I really did want to come and hang out with the ebook nerds. And I realized that I do have some things to say from my new position of being kind of on the other end of the ecosystem. So for those of you who don't know, I work at a company called Safari Books Online. We're sort of a Netflix for ebooks, mostly in the technical and business space. So you get a subscription and you get access to 30,000 some books and videos on technical and business topics. And we'll come back to sort of why that's important in terms of craft. But what it does mean is that now I'm at the end of this chain of events that starts with the ebook production things that you guys do here every day. And while it's important as craftspeople to care about the quality of what you do, you also have to justify it if you're in some kind of an industry. And this is an industry with sometimes very thin margins and a lot of competition and a lot of change. So it's important for us sort of outside of our safe space to make a case for why craft matters to the readers that consume our books in the end. But unfortunately, more importantly, to the publishers and the rest of the industry that have to fund this work. And I think in particular, based on my experience at a company like Safari, I can give you some takeaways that will justify some of the craft that people are finally starting to put into ebooks kind of wholesale. Because right now, even in 2014, it's still true that for most publishers, digital production is still some kind of secret, ancient, dark art that they don't understand. So they know how to make a print book. And then after that, some kind of magic happens, which is that it goes to one of you guys who probably work in the basement, or it goes off to India. And that's really not still, I think, part of what publishing is to a lot of sort of senior folks. But they do know that somewhere at the end, some profit comes out, some ebooks get sold into channels. But so they don't understand that part in the middle, what value you guys add versus maybe just picking the vendor who can deliver an ebook at the cheapest price. So I want to go through some of the horrors that I have seen now working in a reading system, and I'll talk about why this is actually terrible, not just from a pride and kind of nerd rage sense, but also why it's bad business. If you have looked at other people's ebooks, you have seen things like this. I know no one in this room would ever do this. But it's very clear that some of the folks who make the digital products that are sold today do not know the first thing about HTML. And it is as if they were searching for things like, oh, if only there was a way for me to make something emphasized in HTML. I guess I'll just have to invent something myself to do that because there's no element to do it for me. But the thing is, this generally looks okay, and look is most of what people are concerned about when they're doing QA. Does the book open in a Kindle, and does it more or less look fine? Sometimes that's the limit of the QA that we're talking about, or maybe not just Kindle, a variety of ebooks, but it's very surface. And that enrages me, both as a developer, but also because ultimately this is a worse product. I know my needs and my anger is important, but I can say, and we'll show examples of why the craft of ebook does matter to readers and does matter to publishers, even if they don't know it yet. But I'll start with the reader. So this is a real email that we got from one of our largest Fortune 500 customers. About 2/3 of Safari's business is institutional sales. somewhere about even between corporate, government, and academic and public libraries. So a lot of the people who subscribe to our service are actually large firms that then provide that access to their employees or their patrons. And so this was a blind employee at this technology company. So of course this made me sad that there was someone using our service who felt that it wasn't providing value to him. But I also highlighted the part where he expressed surprise that testing for, in this case, accessibility to the visually impaired, and it was just not sort of part of the business. It is for Safari. We do test our products themselves, mostly our web apps, for their accessibility, but we treat what we get from the publishers as something of a black box. We do test whether the metadata is accurate, and it's often not, and whether the book sort of, again, looks superficially okay, but we don't we don't test every single book that comes into our system to find out whether it's accessible. Because if we did, we would probably reject at least half, if not more than that. And when we get a case like this, what we do is, in this particular case, we actually found some source files for this individual to use that were tables that had not been converted to images so they could be read by the screen reader. Really complex tables like this one, that it would be impossible to put this into HTML. It's really, really shoddy work. There was a lot of stuff about this book that really pissed me off. If I don't understand how this happened. This was code. And if you know that there's an element called pre, such that you made a class with that name, like, why didn't you just use the pre? It would be so much better. And there are other books like this in our service. This is one I found just this weekend, which is, it's code, and half of it is text, which is what it should be, and the other half is an image for no reason, and it's centered, and and then this is another book. This is one where this is the maximum font size in our application because the publisher had a very high specificity in the CSS that they put in there, and they set, speaking about fonts, they set the body size to be small, and like they really wanted it to be small because it's, I know I always open a book and I'm like, this font is gigantic, like, whoa man, turn it down. I want to not be able to read this at all. And if you think that people don't notice this stuff other than angry nerds, they really do. So we get customer complaints month after month after month about the formatting in the books in our service. And most people think we made those books, so sometimes they use swears. And to be fair, sometimes these problems are actually in our service. They're in our software, and we fix those bugs when we have them. But more often than not, they're problems in the source file. Things like tables as images, code as images, images that are unreadable, and markup that I put it into night mode and all the text turned black because the text was set to be black in the CSS. We can overcome some of those things in our software, but some of it is just poor quality. And what happens when we get one of those complaints is we take the book out of the service until the publisher can fix it, or until we just basically get a new edition. And that's where we come around to the effect on the bottom line. So there are Safari is not the only ebook subscription service. Scribd and Oyster are both relatively new entrants there. There are also some startups like 24 Symbols. I think there will be more subscription ebook services, at least before there are fewer. And we're really proud of the fact that our business model is something that I don't want to say even a publisher can understand, but it's very, very simple from the publisher's point of view. They give us books. When someone reads it, the publisher gets paid. And there are some differences among all these services in terms of that exact model. Ours, if you read the same book more than once, the publisher gets paid again and again and again every time someone, even the same person, reads the same bit of content. And not just the whole book. Any fraction of the book generates, what starts out as a micropayment and then ends up being significant as more people read more of the content. And that's pretty consistent across most of these services. Someone reads it and somebody makes some money. And when I've been thinking about this, I realized that it's very different than the traditional ebook model, where the person who is making a is making a payment, so the individual who makes a purchase, they have to make a very conscious decision to say, I'm going to look at this web page, like a Kindle product page, I'm going to make a choice and spend some money, and then that's where the money comes. And in our services, it's a lot more like the web, where once you just discover something, that's essentially what the transaction is. A lot of websites are ad-driven, so you look at a website, and the economics of it all mean that your eyeballs, your view of that, was itself what was monetized. And that's a lot like how our service works. You pay up front, and the publisher gets paid every time you look at something. So in the web world, people think very hard about SEO, search engine optimization, because getting a search engine to drive people to content is how most web businesses make money, whatever their nuances are. So I would like you to think about subscription engine optimization, because it's very much the same thing. If you have ever been to any publishing conference ever, you have heard a phrase like this probably 6 million times. Metadata is important for discovery. We keep repeating it because apparently it needs to be repeated. And the reason metadata is so important for discovery in the traditional channels is that if you think about a Kindle product page or an Amazon product page, it's nothing but metadata. It's the cover, it's the reviews, it's the description, it's the title, it's the author. If you drill down, you might be able to read inside this book, but that's not what's really on the page. And the inside of the book is not what brought you to that product page. The inside of the book didn't bring you to the purchase decision. It was the metadata, so it's important. But in a service like ours, the inside of the book is just as important as its metadata. And the markup that is inside our book, which is mostly what we're talking about when we talk about ebookcraft, is incredibly important in a product that puts the insides of books in a place that's discoverable, which is the web. We have 2 layers of search engines sort of at work in any of our products, and they both play a role here. So this is a screenshot from Safari Flow. This is our flagship product that Pablo, who you heard do the comic talk earlier, helped design. So we have all our books in here, and it has a search box at the top. And so let's say this is a hypothetical situation. Let's say I'm a programmer, which I am. I'm a subscriber to Safari, which I would be. And I had an error message. I had an error in my application with this variable redirect field name, which is a real variable in the framework that we actually use to build Flow. If I do a search in Flow for that, I get 2 results. But in fact, there's actually a 3rd book in our service that covers this topic that mentions this variable name in some code that you might want to look at and learn something from, but it looks like this. And it's made with Calibre, which, as we know, is a very useful tool for managing your own books and not for making production quality ebooks that you put into the channels. So that's unfortunate, because what happened in this scenario, if I were a subscriber, is that the publisher that made this book didn't make any money, and the publisher that made a book where that wasn't true did. Now, even outside our service, we expose quite a bit of the book content sort of in a snippet form. But what it means is that the markup that you guys do, that I think we have been comfortable for a while thinking of as being kind of locked away in a zip file or just fed through the Kindle Gen shredder, it turns into something that no one ever sees. It doesn't matter. All that matters in the end is the presentation, the visual presentation to the user who's reading a Kindle or a similar device. But that's not really true anymore. So for every book in our service, for every chapter in those books, we make a sample. It's very similar to Kindle samples. But unlike Kindle samples, we put them on the web. So if you did a search for something, some text that actually was matched inside the book, so not the metadata, you'll notice 2 things. One, Google are a bunch of jerks, and they put their result first all the time. Just hate them. It's their website, whatever. But there's no, and I truncated all the irrelevant results. These were the only 2 results for this book. Neither of them is an Amazon result, although I'm this is an O'Reilly book, in fact, so I know it's an Amazon service. But I think all publishers are interested in ways in which they can sell books that aren't necessarily always going through the Amazon gateway, and this is a thing that Amazon just doesn't do. They don't expose the book content out to the web. And if you click on that link in Safari Flow and you're not a subscriber, so you're just some schmo wandering in off the internet, you get a little snippet from the book at the top and then a bunch of stuff saying, please give us money. But if you looked inside that markup, and I know you can't read it, the details don't matter, but the part of the book that we excerpt is the markup straight from the EPUB. So we took the thing that was hidden inside the zip file, we put it out there on the web. Because this is from a good publisher, what I highlighted is that the quote is a block quote, the headers are all headers. You know, it's all very real markup that plays very nicely on the open web. And I'm still involved in ebook standards, so there's a huge amount of discussion about ebook semantics and the semantics that are available in EPUB 3, and it may change based on other stuff that's happening in the web. And it's all very interesting, but sometimes it can feel very academic because you're being told to spend a huge amount of time doing markup, that has to be created by humans because semantic markup means that you are conveying the meaning behind the text. But what happens? Like you spend a lot of time on it, but there's really nothing consuming it. There's no ebook readers that really respond to it. But there is one system out there that understands ebook semantics, and it's Google. So this is an application Google offers called the Data Highlighter. It's for people who make websites. It has nothing to do with publishing per se. But you put your website in it, and it gives you this kind of pretty cool interface where you can highlight different parts of the document and tell it the meaning of those elements. So when we prepared Safari Flow, we told it some things. So we told it, at the bottom, that the book chapter was in this element, that this image was always going to be the book cover, that these elements were always going to represent the author. So you see that on the right. That's the extract that Google sort of pulled, the semantic knowledge that it understands from the book. But the thing that's highlighted, the words printing PDFs, which Google says on the right is the title of the page, is not ours. That came from the book. And Google's able to infer, because of its position in the document, and most importantly, because it's a header, that it's a header. And it just knew automatically that that was the title of the book. And out on the web, if you were a user, not a Safari subscriber, just a regular person who was trying to understand how to print a PDF, who doesn't know? Okay, well, anyway, if you search for printing PDFs in Google, this page from this book would have a much higher chance of being found than if it was this exact same page and the person who made the markup had made that a paragraph with a big style. Because Google knows that this is a header, and it knows that headers are important. The other flip side, the sort of thing we get for free out of this ecosystem where we have high quality markup and it's on the web, is that we can use some of the analytics tools that are, again, driving the really active web business, but we can use it to discover interesting things in publishing. This is a little bit specific to our service because of just how it works, but I hadn't really even thought about using Google Analytics, which we use to track the health of our product, but I realized just because of how this all falls out that we can use it to track the health of, or find interesting things about how people use the book itself, and in a way that this is data that most of the other vendors haven't been willing to share, even though they certainly know everybody's reading behavior. So same book, Lean Analytics by O'Reilly. Because they know what they're doing, they did a nice job of naming all their files in a way that a human can understand. And the thing on the right is average time on page, is how Google expresses it, but it's really reading time. I could have shown you number of visits or number of users who hit any one of these chapters, but I actually think reading time is just much more interesting because it's not actually how we're used to thinking about web pages, but it is very much how we think about books. And this is just literally the first one I pulled up, and it had something interesting to say, which is that, yeah, of course, chapter 1 and chapter 2 what it's saying if it's green is that it has more than the average reading time across the rest of our website. And our website is mostly books. So, people were more than on average interested in reading the first couple chapters, which is kind of what you expect. But there's something really interesting about chapter 6, which is a chapter of this book that people spend a lot of time reading. They didn't just hit it and then bounce off, which we can see too. In fact, we can see which pages were so repellent to people that they just exited the site entirely, which maybe we won't tell our publishers about. But the things that we can say is that chapter 6 of this book is interesting. And our books are nonfiction, so that is actually useful information. In fiction, that wouldn't, that would be pretty weird. But it's not really as actionable as it is in nonfiction, where there's something about this topic that people found very compelling and really wanted to spend a lot of time on. So this whole round trip of does markup make better performing books that then make more money? I have a little anecdote, at least, that I can say where I can see this whole round trip and how it did work. Back in December, we did a content marketing exercise, which basically just means that we wanted to drive interest in our product, and we did that by trying to promote some of the books inside the product. And because I'm a Python programmer and I wasn't in the meeting, they volunteered me to write the one on learning how to program in Python. And so when I went and looked, we have 86 books and videos in our product that are about Python, and I was told to select some representative, select the best. And I picked 6. And I wanted to do 50-50 books and videos, so 3 videos, and I picked these 3 books. And the reason I picked them were these, among all those others, and most of those 86 are books, not videos. The reason I picked these are some of the obvious things. The writing was good, the material was good. It was a range of Learn Python the Hard Way, which the title's ironic, is very narrative and very wordy, and Learning Python is obviously a traditional Riley book, very sort of reference-focused, and the last one is sort of in the middle. So they were all good books, but there were other good books. And the reason I picked these 3 in particular, I think this is the middle one, this is Learning Python, was that the markup is good. So it looks good in our service. We have somewhat opinionated CSS, which you guys may disagree with, but we tried it, at least in a publisher-friendly way, to make the books in our service look alike. We have opinions about what the branding of the product is, so we have opinions about color, and so our CSS that sits on top of the publisher CSS sometimes does override things, so that's our green. So I looked for books that honored that because it makes our service look good. And most importantly, I looked for books that had good code because this was about programming, and this is a nicely marked up. I think it's a pre with a code inside. Whatever you should do, that's what they did. So I selected that. And we did a bunch of promotion, and from December until now, at this point in this service, 56% of all of the access, all the reads of all the books and videos on Python are the ones we featured. So from me as an opinionated angry nerd, my opinions about how the books were marked up has generated more revenue for those books that I picked. And I can promise you that there were a couple books that would have made it if they had been better crafted. They would have been in here, and they were not. Because although we think of ourselves as a publisher-friendly organization, we're owned by publishers, we generate a lot of revenue for publishers because of that payment model where people just get paid again and again and again. We also have a pretty hard line about how we want to treat our users, because the users, the readers, are the folks who entrust us with their money, and we take that responsibility very seriously. So while we don't have a published mantra, I think we might after I prepared this, because I feel very strongly about these 3 things. I'm not going to recommend a book or promote a book that is not accessible to everyone who wants to consume it. You have put stuff in images where there was no reason to, if it is not accessible to a screen reader, I will not promote it. We're not going to feature books that, in my mind, are not useful. So a programming book that has code that is in an image is not useful. It is not fit for purpose. And then please don't make it ugly. We have a service that we are trying to sell. We want to feature the things that look best in it and perform best. And I think that there is, at least at this point, enough data for you guys to go back and say that if you make the investment to do a high-quality book in a world where books are going into browsers and are subject to alternative business models other than just let's throw it in the Amazon store and hope for the best, there is a reason to take time to do the craft, and it will pay off for the publishers in the end. Thank you.